Well, good Sunday morning to you. The smallest but mightiest crowd I've seen here in time. So I'm pleased to see you here. I know our numbers online are a little higher than normal, so probably we had some folks that have just decided, probably stayed out late because of the horse race last night, just partied a little too much and needed to stay home or watching online. I'm glad that you're watching anyway, though. But thank you, those that are here, for being here and for wearing your mask. And a reminder, we've got our offering plates on the back, so we don't have any contact passing of any germs that might be on our hands. So you can find that back there. You'll also see that our Tonka truck's back for Pennies for Hunger. So please remember that and leave something in that before you head out today. And folks online, we're thankful for you being here. We are Presbyterian Church of the Covenant in Greensboro, North Carolina. You can find out more about us at athinkingchurch.org. You also can make a donation there. There's a donate button. We'd appreciate it. It helps us continue doing these broadcasts. So thank you for considering that, and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start with a couple of readings. And folks online, before I get going on the readings, I would ask you, please leave thoughts, questions you have, or even during the message. I'll get to them afterwards. And also, we love knowing where you're from. If you would just quick little note in your comment section of where you're watching from. But as I'm saying, I'm going to have two readings this morning. The first is a scripture reading. It comes from 1 Samuel, chapter 16, verses 14 through 23. I'm reading from my mother's, in honor of Mother's Day, I'm reading from my mother's favorite translation. It's called the Living Bible. Hear now these words. But the Spirit of the Lord had left Saul, and instead the Lord had sent a tormenting spirit that filled him with depression and fear. And some of Saul's aides suggested a cure. We'll find a good harpist to play for you whenever your tormenting spirit is bothering you, they said. The harp music will quiet you and you'll be well again. All right, Saul said, find me a harpist. And one of them said he knew this young fella in Bethlehem, the son of a man named Jesse, who was not only a talented harp player, but was handsome, brave, strong, and he had good, solid judgment. What's more, he added, the Lord is with him. So Saul sent messengers to Jesse, asking that he send his son David the shepherd. And Jesse responded by sending not only David, but a young goat and a donkey carrying a load of food and wine. And from the instant he saw David, Saul admired and loved him, and David became his armor bearer. Then Saul wrote to Jesse, please let David join my staff, for I am very fond of him. And whenever the tormenting spirit of depression and fear from God troubled Saul, David would play the harp, and Saul would feel better, and the evil spirit would go away. We add blessing and meaning to the reading of those words. I also want to read a short excerpt from a book called The Misfits Manifesto by Lydia Yukonovich. It says, you can be a drunk, you can be a survivor of abuse, you can be an ex-con, you can be a homeless person, you can lose all your money or your job or a husband or a wife or the worst thing imaginable, a child. You can lose your marbles. You can be standing inside your own failure, a small sad stone in your throat, and you still are beautiful. Your story is worth hearing because you rare, phenomenal misfit, are the only one in the world who can tell the story the way that only you can. Doug, I wonder if we can get you to play us some music.
Well, to kind of come out of that, I got a story to tell.
Excellent.
When I was discussing with my sweetie, who most of you know, what I should do today, and she goes, "Well, it's Mother's Day. Do that song about your mother." I went, "It's not really about my mother. It's about my parents." And she goes, "But do it. It's pretty and it makes me cry." So, who am I to say? This is called Betty and Doug. I'm a third, just so you know. She was born in Orange County of good Southern stock. Her mother a florist on the main downtown block. He grew up in a small town, a merchant's first son, and he went off to college to have him some fun. Worked as a lifeguard at the beach, and they never forget when she drove down with girlfriends, and there they first met. And if life is a journey, and the path walked is love, so begins the journey of Betty and Doug. Years later, they'd argue about just who chased who. In the end, it didn't matter when they both said I do. They promised each other to stay true till death. Barely 9 months later, I drew my first breath. My siblings would follow, each 5 years apart, and each of us had our own place in their hearts. And if life is a journey and the path walked is love, so continues the story of Betty and Doug. Life wasn't always easy. Life wasn't always fair. Failed businesses, kids' divorces, they sure had their share. But their love remained strong. Their love always won out till one August day when Doug's heart gave out. Betty soldiered on for 17 more years, and when we laid her to rest, there were smiles with the tears, 'cause they're dancing together on streets paved with gold. They left us behind to hear their story told. And if life is a journey and the path walked is love, we'll remember the journey of Betty and Doug.
appreciate that. It was beautiful, Doug. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
My message this morning is entitled A Reminder to Be Umbrella Bearers. So, May is National Mental Health Awareness Month. And sadly, there's a small percentage of Americans who are aware of that. And even more sadly, at least from the perspective of this ordained minister, an equally small amount of ministers will be talking about it from the pulpit. It's a sad statement on the issue of mental health in the U.S., despite the fact that 1 in 5 American adults experience a mental health issue, despite the fact that more than 1 in 10 young people experience a period of major depression, despite the fact that 1 in 20 Americans have lived with a serious mental illness such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression. It would seem that we are either afraid or reluctant or maybe just indifferent about talking about mental health, which is strange when you consider those numbers that I just shared alone, because they're enough to make it clear that most of us have someone in our lives that's dealing with a serious mental health issue. This aversion to mental health talk may be particularly true in spiritual communities. And I'm not sure if that's because mental health wasn't really a concept when most religions' sacred texts were written, or if it's just too uncomfortable to talk about in polite company, or something else altogether. But what I do know is that in general, we just don't talk about mental health much. Honestly, if I'm being completely even-handed about this, we also tend not to talk about it much in polite society as well. So that popular bashing of spiritual communities for not talking about mental health that I just partook in, truthfully, it's not very fair at all. The reality is that most people in most places tend to avoid talking about mental health. And for a variety of reasons, that is an unfortunate reality. Some of the reasons are related to spirituality, and we'll get to one of those in a few minutes. But I first like to briefly look at one of the other reasons it is unfortunate. That reason being the misinformation that is out there that could be corrected by having more open conversations about mental health. As I mentioned earlier, 1 in 5 American adults experience a mental health issue. 1 in 10 young people experience a period of major depression. 1 in 20 Americans have lived with a serious mental illness. You probably know somebody with a mental health problem and just don't realize it. Because many people with mental health issues are highly active and productive members of our community. As a matter of fact, I will guarantee you that you know someone with a mental illness, because you know me. Some of you already know I have major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. And for many folks, that tends, the first time they hear it, to come as a surprise. Not only because I've managed, well, at least for the most part, managed to be somewhat high-functioning and productive person despite suffering from major depressive disorder, but also because we like to think of ministers as always being kind of mentally and emotionally even killed. The sad reality is 1 in 4 ministers have struggled with or are currently struggling with mental illness. 1 in 4. What that means for me most days is that I will probably struggle with feeling overwhelmed by something. Frequently for me, it's something that might have an emotional component, a strong emotional component, but it can some days be something as simple as making a phone call. Ironically, one of the days I had scheduled for writing this message, I woke up with a pretty severe case of anxiety, an anxiety attack. Well, it was Mental Health Awareness Month, and I have to tell you that I was very aware of my mental illness. It's not that I had anything to be anxious about. I didn't. That's not how anxiety disorder tends to work. It's that my head was telling the rest of my body that in spite of the fact that there was nothing to be anxious about, we had something to be very anxious about. And with the head being the head, the rest of the body believed it and followed. I spent most of that day with a racing heart, a general feeling of dread, feeling exhausted but unable to sleep, and even the most mundane tasks felt overwhelming. Sounds like fun, right? Now, I talk about these kinds of things openly because despite society's increased understanding and accepting of those of us with mental disorders, the stigma associated with them is still very much a reality. So much so that the National Institute of Mental Health felt the need to develop a term for the stigma. It's now called sanism or saxonism. And just like racism or sexism, it's a form of oppression and discrimination. And just like other isms, it's a social justice issue. And while to some degree we all deal with feelings of being overwhelmed by something on almost a daily basis, major depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, as well as other disorders, can sort of amplify those feelings to the point of basically shutting a person down. My struggle and the struggle for those with similar diagnosis is to manage the anxiety and the depression well enough that it doesn't have to have a heavy impact on my life. And for me, therapy and medication has helped immensely. Except when they don't. Because sometimes they don't. Sometimes the darkness wins out. You begin to shut down and to withdraw. Anxiety wraps itself around your head and your heart. And most things seem like they are either too overwhelming or just not worth the effort. And it all makes no sense at all. And frequently you even intellectually recognize the ridiculousness of it all, but the feeling remains and it tends to control you until it is over. I've also experienced having people that I was very close to attempt suicide multiple times because of mental disorders. I've had a person I work closely with on a daily basis self-medicate to the point of me needing to go to their house and clean them up, including dirt and feces out from under fingernails, and check them in the behavioral health clinic. I've spent weeks visiting one of my own children in that very clinic, and I've also served as the chair of the board for Presbyterian Counseling Center. Now, I share all of that to say I am very familiar with mental health issues. Frankly, I'm more familiar than I ever wanted to be. And that is a big part of why this topic is so very important to me. It's also one of the many reasons that spirituality is so important to me. Let me explain that just a little bit. My explanation will start with a final misconception that I'd like to address today. This one is mostly, and I do mean mostly, an unspoken misconception. I'd like to think that's mostly unspoken because people already understand how untrue it is, but I'm just not all that sure that it is. It's the idea that people are faking it or doing it for attention. I can promise you that almost no one who has ever been clinically diagnosed with a mental disorder has ever thought of it that way. It's pretty much this simple. No one would choose to have a mental disorder. Disorders can be completely debilitating. And as we've already mentioned, society places a great stigma on it. If you could choose not to have it, you would. And I speak of that from experience, more experience than I ever wanted. And speaking from experience, I have something to say to folks who want to help me and other folks who have similar diagnoses. Some of you have heard me say this before. To folks who want to help me, let me say, you can't fix me. You can't. And I know that the desire to help comes from a place of love and of concern. And I know that you feel somewhat helpless and confused and want to do something. And frankly, it makes total sense to me that it seems natural to many folks to try and suggest things that they think could help, but don't. Just don't. Today's scripture provides an example of caring for someone with depression. It's the story of Saul and David and their first meeting. They meet under tormenting situation, at least for Saul. Depression has set in on him. They call for the land's best harp player, David. And from that moment on, whenever depression sets in on Saul, David would sit down and play for him gently on his harp. He didn't judge him. He didn't make suggestions about what might help. He didn't encourage Saul to pull himself up by his bootstraps. He played the harp. And it worked. According to the story, the evil spirits of depression would leave Saul as David played. Saul loved David so much that he honored him by making him his armor bearer. So basically, Saul entrusted David with the care of his instruments of protection. Now, in modern times, we don't really have much need for that kind of armor. So no need for an armor bearer, but it does seem to me we could all use someone we trust to care for us in that way. Maybe particularly those of us with mental disorders. You see, when the depression or anxiety is at its worst, it's like being stuck outside in a massive, drenching rainstorm. It feels oppressive and somewhat hopeless. It seems like it seems like it's going to go on forever, and like it's been going on forever, and that it's never going to end. I don't need someone to tell me I should go find shelter. I don't need someone to tell me how they cope with storms. I don't need someone to point out that it's just a storm and it'll be over eventually. I need someone to sit with me in the storm. I need someone to say, here, let me hold the umbrella. Sometimes I need an umbrella bearer who will sit with me and play the harp. And admittedly, that begs the question, what does holding the umbrella look like? It looks like, well, not using negatively charged words like crazy, psycho, insane, or loony when you're speaking about people who have mental health issues. When you use words like that, it not only intensifies the stigmas, but it implies that the person is somehow defined by their illness. One of the simplest ways of being an umbrella bearer is by intentionally speaking and acting in a way that helps a person preserve the personal dignity of a person with mental disorders. Another way of helping is simply by learning everything that you can about the disorder that someone has. Misunderstanding and a general lack of knowledge can quickly and easily lead to saying things and doing things less than helpful. The more you know, the more you are likely to empathize with their situation. Which also means helping others understand disorders as well as the myths and the stigmas surrounding mental health. Because that can make a significant impact on the environment that folks with disorders have to live in, as well as a significant impact on society in general. So, gently let folks with mental disorders know that you are there for them. But, don't push too much. Frequently, just your quiet but steady presence will aid in weathering the storm. And once the worst of the storm has passed, be an encouraging presence. Listen to them. If they ask for help finding professional support, or if they already have it, then affirm them in the work that they're already doing, or help them find someone if they ask. Mostly just love them. When the mental issues aren't overwhelming for them, help them keep things normal. Treating them with love and respect and encouragement is about the most helpful thing you can do for a person with mental health disorders. For that matter, it turns out that treating people with love, respect, and encouragement is the kind of thing that can make the world a healthier place for all of us. And then finally, back to this reminder for those with and even those without disorders. Again, from Lydia Youngkovich's The Misfits Manifesto. You are beautiful. Your story is worth hearing because you rare and phenomenal misfit, are the only ones in the world who can tell the story the way that only you can. You are beautiful. Doug, can we get you to play us another song, sir?
Okay, this one is brand spanking new, which I always say for everything, just so the mistakes are easy to deal with. Almost kind of sort of fits with what we're talking about. I got to do a little retune here. Hold on. And this is called Gentle. We all know that life can be tough. We struggle and we wonder if we've even done enough. I don't pretend to have the answers. I don't have much to say. Just a little help, a tip along the way. Be gentle with your heart and be gentle with your soul. Be gentle with the ones you love and the ones that you don't know. Be gentle with your body, give it a chance to mend. Always be simple, my friend. Be gentle with your actions. Be gentle with your words. Act on what you see and feel, and not on what you've heard. Stay away from all that's toxic, and choose what serves you best. Your spirit will take care of the rest. Be gentle with your heart, be gentle with your soul. Be gentle with the ones you love and the ones that you don't know. And be gentle with your body and give it a chance to mend. Always be simple, my friend. Be gentle with your heart. Be gentle with your soul. Be gentle with the ones you love and the ones you don't know. Be gentle with your body. Give it a chance to mend. Always try to be gentle, my friend. Always try to be gentle, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Doug. And for those who are watching online in particular, you can find out more about Doug and hear his music at dougbakermusic.com, I believe. So please take a moment to check him out there. We do enter into a more inward turn moment in our time together today. Accept this as a prayer or as a meditation or a moment to find the calmness inside and hold on to the words that have some significant importance to you. Let's bow our heads. In sacred text, we are reminded of the abundance of mothering qualities of the divine. From eagle wings which lift us up to nursing mothers which will not abandon us, biblically, we are assured of a deep and abiding love. Today we pause to give thanks for the deep love of mothers. We give thanks for those who have been a mother in less than traditional ways as well. From older siblings in a motherless home to single fathers raising children on their own, we are thankful for the love they each share, for the way they each care, and for the way they nurture the children of the world. At the same time, we pause to remember those who struggle with the role of mother. And for those who want nothing more than to be a mother, but so far have not found the path that is right for them. And on this day, as a nation celebrates mothers, we remember those who cannot bring themselves to celebrate because their mothers were less than motherly. They were judgmental, belittling, violent, abusive, absent. We think of those who long for an embrace from their mother just one more time. This day, as we reflect on and give thanks for mothers and mother figures in our lives, may we recognize the reflection of divine love in them, and then may we each live into that reflection, not just with those we choose to call family, but with each person we meet. Amen. I offer you this blessing. May you walk in harmony with each other and with creation, recognizing that we are one. And may you know love and happiness throughout your life, and may your words and actions share that love and happiness with all the people you meet. Go now in peace and in love.